Modern superpowers find their world dominance in military might and trade monopolies. Yet for the US, the question of dominating the sphere isn't just about its nuclear power or big corporations. After dwelling on its complex history, you'd realize that some of its natural resources had everything to do with making America a great modern dynasty. When the US harnessed the inherent economic and food supply potential of the Mississippi River, it found itself on the global map. And that's exactly why the Mississippi Waterway is the country's cradle of superpower. Let's explore why. Before we start, subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon to never miss a video from us. In many ways, the Mississippi River for the US is what the Yellow River was for the Chinese civilization. Dubbed as the mother of rivers or China's pride, the river didn't only sustain the country's first civilization, but has also given life to the modern cities of the country. From water supply to the irrigation system, the water takes care of almost 60 cities in modern China. And if you find that impressive, wait till you hear about the wonders of the Mississippi River and the treasure it holds for the American people. Given it's the longest river in North America, it finds its origins in a very small outlet stream from Lake Itasca in northern Minnesota. It's actually the support of more than 100 tributaries that make this river one of the largest systems in the US. Before the river finds its wash in the Gulf of Mexico, it's also joined by important tributaries including the Ohio and Minnesota rivers. Its most important distributary runs right before the Gulf, and you know it as the Atchafalaya River. As the river travels south for 2,530 miles, it also creates a channel with other waterways in the country. The water from 31 states in the US find its ultimate drainage in the Mississippi River, and that unique geographical phenomenon has given the river one of the most fertile sediments freshwater dispensaries. Other than strategic geographical position, the river also finds its due importance in its historicity. Over the centuries, Earth's features have changed significantly. Seas have risen and fallen, ice has melted and glaciarized, and rivers have changed their course. Similarly, the Mississippi can locate its historicity from the Ice Age. During the Ice Age, the Laurentide ice sheet rested upon the river. But as the world's average temperatures increased, the sheet started to melt gradually. That gradual change in Earth's physique gave more fertile sediments and nutrients to the Mississippi region. As the ice sheet melted, more and more glacier sediments rested on the river's bed. Now you know why the river is profoundly fertile and poses importance to the American population. If anything, history has done its due diligence to make America a force to be reckoned with. Due to its fertile land and important nutrients for cultivation, the Mississippi and Atchafalaya Basin is densely populated too. According to the recent US Census data, the third largest basin in the world hosts 31% of the US population. If anything, that makes the river one of the easiest ones to navigate. And here's why. If Mississippi is a work of art, its delta is definitely an artist. The river's most striking monument is the delta which rests upon the Northwest Territory of the state of Mississippi. This particular physical feature of the river is nothing short of a gift from Mother Nature itself. Carved due to the glacial movement, this area is the crown jewel of the river. The delta supports the largest wetland system in the US. And that's because the tip of the drainage funnel has a million years history of sedimentation and nutrient spill. Basically, the constant waves of sedimentation were washed across the Gulf of Mexico, and that has given the delta the most important bird and waterfowl migration corridor in the US. And luckily, the favorable climate of the region is essential for its hardwood forest as well. Essentially, the river system exists as a support staff to contribute to maintaining the country's fragile ecosystem. Without this, the country might even lose its stable supply of energy. Now, you can't operate as a superpower with an energy crisis on your tail, right? Yet, it isn't the climate and the physiography of the Mississippi River that makes it the most important asset for the US mainland. Here's the thing. Our Earth is almost 70% water. The disproportionality between the land and water bodies on the planet is drastically huge. Even then, the impending water crisis is always looming as a threat to the modern world. And that's because all of the water on Earth isn't accessible, let alone usable. Just imagine if the US had to work its way through a homegrown water crisis. Not only its industrial units will take a hit, but its population and the workforce will also be deprived of fresh water too. Such crises are emerging in other parts of the world. And one reason is that they can't access a lot of freshwater bodies due to natural obstacles like forests, mountains, deep pits, and so on. For instance, the vegetation and forestry around the Amazon River are so dense that a lot of the river remains unexplored and untapped. The Mississippi River doesn't have those problems. And that's precisely why it's one of the most navigable rivers in the world. Even from Minneapolis-St. Paul to the Ohio River, you navigate 850 miles of the river in one go. The interconnectedness of the river from north to south and east to west is why Mississippi is considered to be at the epicenter of the river navigation system. But that wasn't always the case. Today, you wouldn't hesitate to boat around the river. You can easily take your steamboat to the river through the South or the Southwest Pass. As far as American history goes, you'd see that the right to navigate the river wasn't always natural for American citizens. Again, everything about the control over the Mississippi is embedded in history and the struggle over the control of the river. That's in congruence with how the systems of colonialism worked in North America. Anyone who controls the rivers essentially controls the flow of wealth. In totality, the Mississippi River has seen the rise and decline of three major colonial powers: the French, the Brits, and the Spanish. In the modern sense, it also exists as the backdrop of the American identity of being both an agricultural and industrial empire. The river was always a treasure for the indigenous tribes of today's North America. On the map, the existence of Native American tribes, Cheyenne, Sioux, Kickapoo, Chickasaw, and many more is centralized around this water body. The fertile land around the delta gave the natives a staple supply of food, and the Mississippi fish was just another bonus for them. And the importance of this river didn't go unnoticed by the non-natives either. You'd be surprised to know that praises for this river have gone as far as the travels of Christopher Columbus. In the Voyages of Columbus, he speaks of a magnificent river that was the giver of life. The famous Admiral map also shows a mouth of a river that is labeled as the River of the Palms. Since the map dates back to 1507, the river carries a rich history along its course. But it's actually the travel of Hernando de Soto, a Spanish explorer, who put Mississippi on the map of the European kingdoms. Hernando had seen the river around Tennessee, and he made sure to write about it in his records. From the archival records, we can see that the Mississippi River was called Rio del Espíritu Santo, or the River of the Holy Spirit. That name was enough to spark the interest of other European explorers that followed North America. In particular, by the early 1600s, the French traders had made settlements along the river. They called the river the Colbert River. Very early on, the French realized the potential of the river and aimed to exploit it for trade routes and further invasion of North American territory. So, where does America enter into this historical account? Well, it's actually the British winning the 7-Year War that changed the course of history for modern America. While the Brits controlled the eastern portion of the river, the Spanish used the western portion. The Treaty of Paris would make the Mississippi River a natural border between the two colonial powers. Even then, Britain had given the passage of the right to navigation to all American citizens, or in other words, the subjects of the British Empire. And they continued to control a large part of the trade on the route, as well as fisheries in their area. It wasn't until the War of 1812 that the British began to lose control of the river. When the French had secretly bought Louisiana from the Spanish settlers, only then America had a passageway to reclaim their river. That's the historically monumental Treaty of San Ildefonso of 1800. 3 years later, the Louisiana Purchase happened. The United States had bought the territory for $15 million from the First French Republic. This is when the country had already waged a war on the British Empire and its North American allies. And of course, the empire wanted to hold on to its prior control of the eastern portion of the Mississippi River. But it was the decisive War of New Orleans in 1815 that decided the eternal fate of the river. After the holistic British defeat in the war that started in 1812, the US officially became the master of the Mississippi River. And that's also when the US was able to further expand its territory to acquire more and more land. But that couldn't have happened if the young US hadn't developed its firm roots in trade routes and raw material supply chains. The role of the Mississippi River became highly crucial because it was the most strategic route for transportation to western US territory. As Jefferson's government took control of New Orleans, they essentially had access to the mouth of the river. Even prior to US control, the city of Jazz was crucial to French trade routes. Similarly, for the young America, New Orleans tapped into trade routes for every raw product that the new country needed to build its economy. Food staples like wheat and corn from the Midwest were supplied via the Mississippi, and furs from the Missouri River found their markets westwards in the same routes. More importantly, the southern staples like tobacco, cotton, and sugar became the epicenter of American trade because of the Mississippi Waterway. Yet the biggest win for Mississippi was the life that it gravitated towards strategic areas like the Midwest. As the river promised work opportunities and a stable supply of food, more and more settlers found their way around the river. This is when America is starting to emerge as a polity for its citizens. And that couldn't have been achieved if the river didn't promise a sense of opportunity and belonging to its people. Not to mention, with the growing trade, the country also needed a robust supply of labor that could have only been transported through the Mississippi River. As the settlers kept traveling westwards, more and more towns and cities were being developed to sustain the growing U.S. economy. By then, the manufacturing of steamboats had taken the country by storm. So, traveling all across the country via a secure waterway yielded more development in the period stretching from 1800 to 1850. Who would have thought a country's river would sustain a blooming country in the North American continent? Even then, it's hard to ignore that the American stretch from 1800 to 1850 is marked by extreme power struggles, diplomacy, and potent war-making. It isn't very surprising to know that the American expansion was quite disturbing to its neighboring territories. The most infamous instance in this particular period is the Mexican-American War. Notoriously, the Mexican territories were controlling the west bank of the Mississippi River while the U.S. controlled the east. Yet again, the river's strategic geographical location came through. As the gateway between the North and South U.S., the river made the deployment of the troops far more convenient than ever. The attacking front lines were in Texas and Mexico, and the river had access to both. Notably, the river's harbor hosted the U.S. troops and ships that made it to the Battle of Veracruz. General Winfield Scott used this route to launch an offensive attack on the city that the U.S. won later on. U.S. victory in the war ended up making America what we know today. The country was able to acquire the present-day states of California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico. It also gained control of some parts of Colorado, Kansas, and Wyoming. In modern war-making, the Mexican-American War is reminiscent of the country's origin as a superpower. Regardless of its painful colonial history, the U.S. was able to harness its military power and economic resources for expansionary purposes. And at the heart of this nation-building is the Mississippi River. By 1850, the country was young in its economic ambitions, but it had surpassed many. That was when the U.S. became the largest exporter of cotton in the world. When the country got access to the Pacific Ocean, it was able to add more exports to its portfolio. The quick transit of raw material from one port city to another was designed along the course of the Mississippi, and remains true even today. The rich fertile delta of the river has made the U.S. one of the largest producers of food. From sustaining poultry farming to producing staples such as rice and wheat, the Mississippi Delta doesn't only maintain food security in the country, but also gives U.S. export value. Just in 2021, United States agricultural exports amounted to $177 billion. The river also happens to add $12.6 billion just from its shipping industry. The state of Mississippi also has a monopoly over cotton production and export, which is very much reflective of the U.S. in the 1850s. Another thing that hasn't changed is the military importance of the Mississippi River. Historically, its geographical position has proved to be strategic for the quick transit of military troops. For the World Wars, the banks of the rivers also served as important training facilities for riverine operations. Even today, the river gives a unique strategic position to the U.S. military by facilitating army camps, transit between military bases, and conducting military exercises. So, just imagine if the U.S. didn't have home support during the World Wars. What could have happened to its trajectory of world dominance? Doesn't seem too optimistic, right? And that's why behind America's superpower lies the Mississippi River. Enjoyed this video? Give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to our channel for more informative content, and share this video with your friends. See you soon!